Profit leaks, how to find and fix them. Brought to you by CFO On Demand from Fitzpatrick, Bongiovanni, and Kelly CPAs. Please support our sponsors, McPeak Wealth Management Group of Wells Fargo, Ansero IT, Levin Stoller, Attorneys at Law, Allegra Marketing, Integris Investing, Tim Pashley, Cooper Levinson, Attorneys at Law, Rich Asset Management, Ocean First Bank, Sturdy Savings Bank, Bank of America, Persky Marone, Attorneys at Law, Merrill Lynch, Altor Oakley Group.
We help individuals, businesses, and pension funds develop strategies to manage, preserve, and transition their wealth. Our clients have unique sets of needs and goals. We strive to develop individual strategies to help them through the wealth management process.
McPeak Wealth Management Group, bringing institutional money management to the individual investor.
And now our presenter, Lou Bongiovanni.
Hello and welcome. This is Lou Bongiovanni, and thanks for joining us this month in our webinar. Our topic this month is profit leaks, how to find and fix them. And this is the most popular of topics that I get as an outsourced CFO. Go to the next slide. I can't proceed to the next slide. All right, great. So the topics that we're going to cover this month are the most common areas for profit leaks, ways to identify your company's profit leaks, and the 7 ways to plug profit leaks. Let's get started. Video working? Okay. Oh, let's see. Oh, it's working. All right. Terrific. First, before we get started, let's talk about profit leaks. We see the picture there of The Profit. I don't know if you're familiar with that show on TV. Marcus Lemonis does a great job on that show. It's very interesting. He picks different businesses, and I think if you're a small business owner, you can really identify with some of the businesses that he looks to invest in. But overall, when we talk about profit leaks, we're talking about the misuse of a company's resources, resulting in less profit than the company is capable of generating. So a company is full of resources. If they get misused, which from time to time they do invariably, every company does, especially small companies that don't have a lot of depth in them, then there is a potential not to maximize your profit. And that's what we're going to talk about. And as an outsourced CFO, this is the area that I focus on the most because the financial area of the business is really the starting point for the services that we provide. So let's talk about 4 general areas that we see profit leaks. One is in the area of people. Second is process. Third is strategy. And fourth is culture. And we'll go over each one of these more in-depthly now. Okay, so first, people. When people have the right tools to do their job well, then profit is maximized. But that's not always the case, and people aren't always reliable. We're not perfect beings here. So that being the case, there's usually opportunities to improve profits as a result. So I'm going to identify a couple of areas of profit leaks as it relates to people. One is too much decision-making ability with certain people. We've all been in situations where maybe we've argued to a person at the register or over the phone how we felt that we were treated unfairly, and due to that, we're requesting or demanding a refund. And many times it's at that person's discretion. They have quite a bit of ability to give that refund. There could be profit leaks as a result of that, because the person who's in charge is just trying to get the person who's angry off the phone, and as a result, they might give away more profits than the owner would have intended. Undocumented critical steps. An example of this is, let's say, a chef at a restaurant who doesn't have his recipes all documented, so he does it one way, but when that chef's off and there's a replacement chef, he or she may do it another way, and as a result, your food costs might fluctuate because there's not a consistency there. There's another potential profit leak. Poor goal communication from management. So this is where management doesn't establish expectations of the people involved as far as targets to hit, whether it's certain quotas that they need to hit as far as on the sales side, or if it's certain tasks to be done within a certain period of time. The clearer that management can communicate, the better the chances there won't be profit leaks. Some additional profit leaks relating to people. Lack of recognition when a decision improves the bottom line. You really, in this situation, need to improve good behavior. You think of when a child is learning how to walk and they're stumbling along, you don't scold them because they fell, you just keep on positively encouraging them when they start walking properly, and then eventually they'll run. Same situation here. What I've seen best practices is in this situation is you recognize when someone's improved profits there, and you make an example of them in a good way. Next is inadequate performance metrics. This is where business owners from time to time will measure the wrong thing, thinking that it drives profits, but it may not. An example of this is business owner might just look at revenue in determining how well the income source is to the company, but they might need to look at, as they're looking at, let's say, the sales forces, how many leads are they getting? How many conversions are they getting? Those are the type of metrics that probably will give more of an indication of potential profit leaks than just revenue alone. And then last point I want to make under people is people in the wrong positions. We're dealing mostly with small, closely held companies. Sometimes there's family members or close friends in there. Invariably, because you're not dealing with a big pool of candidates, you'll have the wrong person in a position that just is not proper for them. That ends up costing so much time in training, inefficiencies through trying to motivate the person. There's usually tremendous profit leaks in that, and you really don't notice it until that person's gone. Next section, the process. Now we've talked about the people, now the actual process or the procedures there. Some people, it's their secret sauce. If they're a service organization, this is the way they do things that make them unique. However, there could be a fair amount of profit leaks in the process itself. For example, inefficient processes where you've not really devoted the time and the attention to automate the process. You have employees who've been there a long time, and you have the process down, so it's not broke or completely broke, so don't fix it. I think of my recent visit to Boscov's, where the equipment is from the 1970s. And when I questioned the person at the register, said, well, most of the people here are 65 or older. It might be inefficient, but we do it very well. There's profit leaks there for sure. Outdated traditional processes, what I just talked about, and the boss as an example would go with that as well, where you just have people who are they've traditionally done this, they're not testing or trying to improve the process, so they're moving forward. Another example is, let's say you have a golf course and the superintendent is doing some things the same way as far as managing their staff. And now they introduce automation as far as scheduling, and all of a sudden a lot more gets done with the exact same amount of crew. And that's an example where there was a profit leak that no one really even saw was there until you threw automation at it. Monitoring the wrong activity. This kind of ties in when we were talking about on the people side, where you're measuring the wrong things here. So for example, let's take a law firm who we work with, where they might be looking at just billable hours, how many hours each individual person is charging to clients. However, they should also look frankly more critically at the actual billings, what the actual bill ends up being, as opposed to the effort made there, because that will show if there's true profit maximization. So you need to monitor the right things in order to truly uncover profit leaks in the process. Other things relating to process, lack of production employee feedback. So if you are, and this is not only in producing widgets or in the manufacturing side, this could very much be in the service side as well, where the people who are closest to the customer are not being asked for feedback. So if you're in a restaurant, you want to talk with the waitress or the manager of it. They're the ones who are interacting with the customers. The owner or the chef is in the back. He or she is not doing that for the most part. So you want to get some feedback from them. Next is lack of commitment in technology by ownership. So I gave the Boscov example, but there's plenty others like it, where ownership is skeptical as far as making a large capital investment because they don't know of the benefits as far as the efficiencies of it. I'll take the landscaper who invests in a large piece of equipment, which now requires less reliance on man hours in order to accomplish the task of either picking up leaves or mowing lawns. So you need to measure the impact of the efficiencies of a piece of equipment versus the labor hours and see what works best for you. Obviously, CFOs do that often, and that's something that we come across quite a bit. And the last point I want to make as far as process is inventory mismanagement. This is a big one. As I did more and more research, I didn't realize how big of a problem this is. This is tracking inventory, whether you're investing in inventory guns to monitor it properly, or if there's chargebacks because inventory was shipped improperly or damaged. Think of a food distributor who has to really monitor those issues as well. But inventory mismanagement can be a big profit leak that the owner needs to decide how much is an acceptable level and look into that more closely. The third area we talked about as far as profit leaks is strategy. And this is really the thought process primarily of ownership and somewhat management. This is the direction of the company. So one item that I see is a big problem is chasing revenue anywhere and everywhere. So for example, I'll take a service business. I'll take a law firm. Let's pick on lawyers. I'll take a law firm. So there, although they're not necessarily very proficient at it. The inefficiencies it takes to accomplish that rarely are worth the billings that you get, because it's a one-off. You're just not doing it efficiently. It seems like a lot of money at first, but then when you add up what it took to deliver that product or that service properly, it's rarely worth its while. This is the learn how to say no to customers, clients, or frankly, employees at times here. Very hard for business owners to do, but usually a source of profit leaks for sure. A new line of business with old processes. So if you have, I'll take the landscaper again who decides maybe to go into tree lighting over the off season. If they implement the same lawn care processes to the tree lighting, which I've seen, you'll find that there's inefficiencies. And it's not till you go through one or two cycles and you realize it's not an identical process, although you may be using the same people. There needs to be a different strategy there as far as delivering the process. There'll be profit leaks as well. And lastly, on this topic, not knowing your numbers, not knowing which key performance indicators, and we've talked about that term, so I won't define it here, are important to look at. Which ones really tell you the story as far as how well you're doing? You can look at industry averages for it, but you could also look at your own company history as to when you've performed better or more profitable, what did those indicators look like then? So it's a little back testing on that. Some additional strategy items. Unpredictable external threats. Just picked up the Wall Street Journal and you see this issue of external threats and the embodiment of tariffs. So you have certain industries that are impacted by tariffs that didn't see that coming probably 2 or 3 months ago, but now it's a real issue. So those things could create some profit leaks because you lost some revenue as a result of it. Those things you need to be, as owners, you need to be ready to respond to them the best you can. Ownership not willing to take chances. This is really where the entrepreneurship of the owner comes into play, and where I've seen owners who are more entrepreneurial become more successful at what they do, as opposed to owners who have a superior product or service. It's not really the product or service all the time. It's the drive of the owner, the commitment of the owner to improve revenue or to cut costs here, and it's usually driving revenue. Those type of owners focus more on driving revenue. And then lastly, lack of commitment to constant improvement. The owners who succeed are constantly looking to improve processes and challenging their staff, their management team, to make things better, to rework calculations, to revisit matters. And that commitment really ends up paying off, because profit leaks aren't something you fix once and they're fine. It's an ongoing philosophy, and we're going to talk about culture right now. So when we talk about culture, kind of led you right into that, we talk about the actual culture of the company, and that comes right from the owner. If the owner has a mindset and values for the company that are sound and proven, and they communicate that value system to management and ultimately to each employee there, you usually have a sound company that's going to be profitable. If the owner does not do a good job with that and doesn't see the value of the company as something critical to communicate as far as the culture, you will see profit leaks every time with that. Owners think business is doing well, I'm going to go out and play golf. There's nothing wrong with playing golf, but the owner needs to realize that they have a job to do that maybe is not the nuts and bolts of delivering the product or service. Management not valuing its employees' efforts. This is again where you're not being recognized for doing something right, and those key managers who maybe are more valuable than their paycheck You need to acknowledge that and put in incentives in place so that they keep on doing good things and they're not felt that they're taken for granted. Many times business owners hesitate complimenting management too much because they fear they're going to demand a raise. Good employees, I don't find do that. I think they're appreciative if they're felt they're treated fairly. Some other items with culture. Not having a positive-minded culture. This is where, again, this comes directly from the owners. I've seen good companies with owners who have bad attitudes towards the job. Maybe it's something personal that creeps into the business. And really, the feel for an office or a store can change dramatically for the good or bad based on the owner's mindset. If the owner's going through tough times, whether it's on a personal level or health reasons, whatever the case may be, that will impact small businesses for sure. So that's something that sometimes is not avoidable, but don't underestimate if the owner takes his or her eye off the ball, that profit leaks don't happen. Not holding employees accountable all the time, and this kind of ties in what I just said as far as keeping your eye on the ball. Employees many times are seen viewed as children. Like the owners would be the parents, the employees are children. Sometimes we see that analogy, and that being the case, I don't know about you, but when I tell my son to clean up his room once, he doesn't do it for the next 10 years. I have to tell him constantly, probably feels like every 10 minutes. Well, employees maybe are not that bad, some might be, but you need to constantly repeat things. So that's where the accountability has to be constant. There's someone who has to be a champion of that, and it can't just be the owner. Employees not taking ownership. This is where the employees do not have the mindset of the owner, and I hear this quite a bit. The employees who do, the owners sometimes don't realize how lucky they are, and that's something that is hard to teach. That has to come out in the interview process. Okay, so we've hit those 4 areas, but let's talk about your business specifically. How do you know what your profit leaks are? Well, I put together some questions that I would suggest that you consider in assessing your own individual business and where you think the profit leaks are. And then depending on the answer to these questions, you can get your financial person there, your CFO, or your controller to really help focus on some of these areas. So first one is, have there been lost profits or lost sales, opportunities? When people think about profit leaks, a lot of them think of, okay, am I spending too much on these costs and I need to rail in the costs? But really, one of the biggest contributors to profit leaks is lost revenue opportunities that we're not taking advantage of. And that's where there needs to be a focus on that metrics as it relates to your sales force. Is there unpredictable revenue growth or reduction periods? Are there cycles to the business in which your internal staff, the people as well as costs, are not going in lockstep with? So for example, if you have a seasonal business and the business has a downturn, are you reducing your costs at that time, right at the same time, so that you don't have a situation where there's a week or 2 weeks where you have much higher payroll, take payroll for example, than you need for the revenue that's generated? Those kind of misfires, let's say at the beginning of a cycle, at the end of a cycle, add up when you're looking at the profit for the course of years. So I'm thinking of a retailer who I work with who has those kind of cycles, and it's a constant challenge to make sure that you don't have more salespeople on staff than you need to, and that really relies on the manager. So as the manager does well as far as letting people go and such during the course of a day or a week, he or she should be rewarded for that. Is there excessive employee turnover? Employee turnover is a tremendous profit leak. You can read all the statistics if you go to human resource sites. The cost of of replacing employees, about 50% of that employee salary. So if you pay someone $50,000, it would take about $25,000 in lost profits in order to replace that person and get that person's replacement working as well as the person who just left. So if that turnover happens quite a bit, and that's obviously just an average, if that turnover happens quite a bit at certain levels, that could be a tremendous profit leak. And if you don't believe me, think about when you had some good employees in a particular position, how well the business ran and how much money you make versus some real, bad employees at that level, just ones that didn't work, and how it cost you. You can control that as the owner, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about the 7 ways to plug profit leaks. That's a biggie. Review salaries by position. You want to make sure that what we're getting at there is you want to make sure that the person who is making you money, even though they're at a position that warrants a certain salary, if they are making you money, I would put incentives in there in order so they can make more money. If they're superstars, they need to be paid as superstars. LeBron James doesn't get paid the same as a lesser basketball player for a reason. Some other questions there. Has there been large inventory chargebacks? This is where you can see if there's mismanagement of inventory and where you're having cost overruns because people are touching inventory again, or you have to send it back out. That could be a big leak depending on the nature of your business. Or occupancy costs too high. When you look at the space that you need, especially when you're incorporating technology, automation, and things are changing around you, do you need the same footprint as you did before under the old ways? When you think about manufacturing, you think about the space they needed in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. They don't need nearly as much space, right? A piece of equipment is much more efficient, takes up less space. So that might be applying to you as well. Have you examined the return on investment on marketing and sales costs? So what's the cost of acquiring a new customer or client? And what are the efforts of marketing monies you're throwing at there? Are you going to conventions and things of that nature? We have a client who's trying to ramp up their sales. They're spending a tremendous amount on trying to acquire clients. And you have to weigh the balance of what those costs are versus what the return is and pull back the reins sometimes if you're not getting the right amount. And that's difficult to do because you just don't know when that extra expenditure is going to get you a big client. Are transactional fees higher than industry averages? So whether they're credit card fees or any fees relating to actually delivering the service, you want to make sure that they're in line with what you're dealing with as far as industry averages. Okay, so now let's talk about the 7 ways to plug profit leaks. We talked about the 4 areas where there's a lot of profit leaks. We talked about how to assess them in your particular business. So now let's talk about how to fix them. And I want to give you 7 takeaways to think about. And these aren't overnight successes, but some things you can do right away and hopefully see some profit. The good news is your efforts could be easily measured because we're looking to increase your bottom line. And as an outsourced CFO, that makes me excited. That's what justifies our existence and our involvement. So this very much hits home. So number 1 is improve hiring team process. So as I mentioned to you before, it is a tremendous profit leak if you have the wrong person in the wrong position. So in order to avoid that, you want to be proactive. You want to improve the interviewing process to get a better selection. As I mentioned to you before, a lot of those profit leaks can be avoided if you have the person there with the right mentality and plugs in with the values of your company. That all happens during the interview process. Afterwards, you're stuck with the person. You're not going to change their value system. Be clear on measurable expectations, what's expected of that employee depending on what level they are, and make sure that they're up to the task. If they've had previous experience, have they been able to deliver those type of numbers here, or you ask them to do something they've never done before. And you get what you pay for sure. You know, if you're trying to bring in a person who's making 30 to 40,000 and you're expecting these tremendous things from them, it's hard to make a living. It's hard to have a life and support a family at those kind of dollar amounts. You need to think about what's the right pay for the amount of responsibility you're giving that person. Next, metrics, tracking profit. All right, this is measuring the right things. We had a whole webinar on KPI, so I won't get too in depth with this, but there's a lot of these topics interweave and support each other. This is develop a clear KPI for each employee level so they know what's expected of them. You want to share as much information as you're comfortable as an owner. If you want them to be profit-minded, you need to share certain aspects of it. Maybe you don't want to show them the whole profit and loss, certain aspects of it, whether it's their department or a certain line of service or product. You want to do that. And lastly, on this point, you want to make sure that you meet periodically. There needs to be this accountability. You can't be just meet with them when things are going wrong. That never flies well because, first of all, they're dreading that meeting and there's rarely any proactive or productive discussion that happens. Meet periodically, good or bad. Number 3, leadership as a watchdog mentality. So watchdog, you see some Dobermans there, but really the watchdog mentality is you're a watchdog for your profits. The responsibility can't just be the owner's, because when the owner is doing something different, you don't want the profits to leak there. It can't just be owner and management. It really needs to be trickled down to every employee. And the more the employees think of profit leaks and how to avoid them, and sometimes you do have to sacrifice profit for client satisfaction. I know that. And there's a delicate balance, but the more direction you can give people on the front lines, the better, like the people in the customer service department of your store. You want to make sure that everyone has this mentality. I personally believe that management should have skin in the game. So there should be a component of their compensation that links to the profits of the company as a percentage, either a loose percentage or a tight percentage. So as the company wins, they win. And if the company loses, they don't get as much. All levels must have buy-in in the watchdog concept. I just talked to you about that. I very much believe that. Obviously, the higher levels should have more at stake with that. And you want to get them to think and act like it's their money. So for example, if you and I go out to dinner and you know I'm paying, and I said, get whatever you want, you might be inclined to get an appetizer and a dessert and maybe a glass of wine. If we go out to dinner and we're each paying our own way, you might not be so inclined to get those things that I just mentioned. So you want the employees to think as owners and be mindful of what expenditures they should make and what revenue they want to go after. Number 4, communication clarity. This is a big one. I've done some research, obviously, in preparing for this webinar, and I have to tell you, there was a lot of emphasis on this part. So this is something that I learned from doing the research and preparing here, is that more time needs to be spent with ownership being very clear on what their expectations are to management and frankly the other owners, so that employees know what truly drives profit. A lot of times owners presume the employees have a concept of a profit and loss and what drives profits. But many times they don't, because they're good managers because they can manage people and they can manage process. They're not good managers because they can understand the nuances of a profit and loss statement. So that's something where I do believe ownership can invest more time and educate them on the impact of their decisions as far as saving money or preventing waste. And you want to financially reward good actors. These are good performers in your company there. As I mentioned to you before, I think they should have skin in the game. If they don't formally have it, but someone has a suggestion that they made, it could be at any level, and it was a very good suggestion as far as improving profitability or saving costs. I think you need to give them an attaboy and some kind of financial reward to show that you're really serious and that really meant a lot to you. Commitment to improve processes. As I mentioned before when we were talking about the profit leaks could happen at any time, and they're not something where you fix it once and they're fine, just like any other leak, I guess. You have to constantly be on top of it. So when it comes to the process, because there's so many moving parts usually in delivering a product or service, and with changes in customer or client demands, changes in technology, ways to properly automate, it's a constant juggling act as far as how to improve it. So it can't be you think about it once, you have it, people get real good at it, and you walk away and you just don't look at it until it's broke or really broke, and then you revisit again. That's a mindset that works well for top companies that I deal with. Is there's a constant commitment for improvement. So you need to challenge the employees to do that. You don't want to get stuck on the old processes. We mentioned that even though your employees might be incredibly efficient with it, it doesn't matter. It's I think of the adage where before the automobile came, the employees might have been real good at riding horses. So you don't want to go with an automobile because employees don't know how to drive. So you won't do that. So you would have lost all that. The advances of automobiles as opposed to horse and buggy, because the employees just weren't as good at it. You can't have that mentality here in order to maximize profit. We talked about constantly seeking cost-effective options and get employee input. We talked about the lack of employee input can be really difficult, especially if the owner is far removed from the employees. If you're dealing with an amusement ride where you have a lot of customers coming in at relatively small dollar amounts here, it's good to get a pulse from it, and there's no better person to get a pulse from it than the people who are right there on the dealing with the customer. Waitresses are a good example at restaurants as well. All right, training your team. Training is a constant. I kind of made the joke about my kid and him cleaning up his room, but it's an ongoing process here, and employees are busy, they're distracted, they might take their eye off the main goal or some things that improve profits, and it's really up to management and ownership ultimately to make sure they stay on track with that. There are certain metrics that need to be put in place so that if things go offline, you could see it right away. It's very measurable, and that spurs some good conversation and retraining. I think if you have a mentality with your employees that if something goes wrong, you see that as a training opportunity as opposed to a way of scolding your employees, I've never seen that environment really work well. If you keep it positive and retrain and give the employees every opportunity, and some employees will rise to the occasion and some will not, but the constant repetition is needed, and then eventually you need to establish if the employee's not getting it and you really have the wrong employee for that position, you need to either find a new position in the company if you like the employee's values and work ethic, or you need to mutually agree to move on. And which would be best for the employee because they're not ultimately happy, and frankly, you're not happy either. And owners need to be hands-on. And I know certain owners really are very much hands-on, but the truth of the matter is some tend to not be at times, and you need to be consistently hands-on. So it's okay if you want to do different things to try to grow the business, but there should be an accountability and meetings periodically. And last, a commitment to ownership decisions. Here, this ties in. We were just talking about owners. I've heard it called managerial courage, where the owners need to make the hard decisions, whether it's being honest with the employee as far as them not being the best person for that position, or we're dealing with retraining employees or making hard decisions as far as big investments in equipment in order to increase efficiencies. They're all real hard decisions that take courage and take a commitment to a decision and not going back on that commitment. Delegation is also important. I know certain owners struggle with that because they can do it better, and just because they can do it, they think they should do it. Big problem, because guess what? You don't grow. You have little boutique places that really don't grow, and you're limiting your own revenue, which is frankly a profit leak, right? If you're limiting your revenue, that is a profit leak because you're not hitting the most than you can in profits. And lastly, outsourcing. Core areas of your business that you don't do well or you don't do profitable should be revisited in order to see whether or not you should outsource them. Again, that's an area that CFOs look at extensively for clients and make sure that when they do the cost analysis to see which one is better. Many owners are surprised at what the outcome is. And it might be one answer 2 years ago, but now because of certain factors, a better answer might be now. Okay. Recap those 7 ways to plug profit leaks. 1 is improve hiring team, improve the hiring team process. 2 is metrics, get the right metrics to measure profitability so that if it goes off track, we catch it right away. Leadership is a watchdog. You want leadership and all owners to kind of be watchdogs toward the profitability. Communication clarity, that's not only from the ownership to management, from management to the rank and file. Be real clear on what drives profit. Don't assume things. Commitment to processes, that's a constant improvement to processes, because in this day of automation and technology, things change real fast. Constantly training your team. This is constantly making sure that the team members in this changing environment are on board. And being committed to your ownership decisions, having the courage to make the hard decisions, stay true to them, and see them through to the end, because there are bumpy roads along the way. And I know that as doing the performing the CFO work, we're right there with owners as they make some rather hard decisions. And what we see here on the left side, the before, is a lot of times there is inconsistencies in the results. So you have the financial reporting on the bottom left, on the left side, the accounting staff, the controllers doing the best they can. Financial analysis becomes spotty because they're so busy working on reporting. The business owner is trying to grow the business, and what happens invariably is you get inconsistent results. What we do here at CFO On Demand is we create that reinforcement in the middle. We act as your CFO. We help obtain the information that you get from your internal or external accounting department. We help with the financial analysis, so those business owners now are not just problem solvers, they're not just operators, they're actually strategists looking forward, improving their profit and their bottom line, as opposed to not being able to really grow the company and being stuck. And we know strategists every time beat operators here. We have General Electric. They've been in the Wall Street Journal quite a bit with the losses that they've had under the current owner. They're on the current CEO on the right. I think it's Flannery is his name. But off on the left, there's no question that Jack Welch was a tremendous strategist. You talk about managerial courage. That guy was fearless. Maybe not well liked at times, for sure, but that guy really knew how to be a strategist and was a tremendous leader and took GE to heights they never saw. So you want to be a courageous leader and a strategist as opposed to an operator. Upcoming webinars. We have 2 left for this year, and then we're going to be rolling out the 2019 series. We're going to continue this going forward. We've gotten tremendous feedback and input, and I do appreciate those of you who have watched our webinars, whether live or on YouTube, and have given us some great feedback. I will ask this of you. If you can please email me with topics you'd like to hear. This past year, I've put together mostly topics that I've seen over the years, but please, anything that you would like to hear. We're putting that together as we speak, so that would be great. I'd love to incorporate that into the next year's series. Here are our sponsors again. As far as questions, we don't have one, but I'll mention one that I get often is, how do you get the employees, how do you get management really to buy in? And I think it's important to have them buy in with financial incentives. I hear that question all the time, so I made my own question up this time. Thank you very much for joining us. We're right at our time, so I don't want to go over. Please watch us on YouTube again if you want to see it. And if you like it, please tell other people, other business owners to watch it. We love getting more hits on our YouTube. We monitor that greatly, and I appreciate it. And good seeing you, and I'll see you next month. Take care.